Hello, all of you wonderful people out there in broadcast land. Welcome to another episode of Black and White Reviews. My name is Chuck.
My name is Lee.
My name is Will.
And today we are discussing, I believe it's 1995.
Six.
96.
96.
Yeah.
Val
96.
Kilmer. 96. Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas in The Ghost and the Darkness. And I want to let Will go first today.
Well, hold on. There's a few other people there's a few people here that we missed. Let's just make sure we're getting it right. So there's Theoden, Ant-Man, Black Panther, Batman, Carmine Falcone. Oh, and the Wachati.
Say Batman?
Yeah.
He already said Val Kilmer.
Oh, yeah, Val Kilmer.
I know, but okay. So Theoden,
Yes.
obviously. So he's
Doctor.
the king is the Doctor.
Yep.
Ant-Man, he's the original Ant-Man, Hank Pym. Black Panther, the dude Samuel there was T'Chaka, right? He was the original Black Panther.
Okay.
The father, yep. And then Batman. And then you've got the Tom Wilkinson, who was Carmine Falcone in Batman Begins.
Yes.
And the Wachati, because those dudes were all wearing red. You know, the loogie. Shikaka.
Yes.
Yeah, so want to make sure we have it all right here. So there's that.
Yes, a lot of actors played on both DC and Marvel.
And Marvel. And Ace Ventura.
So, Will, your thoughts on this film? If you hate it, that's okay.
No, I'm just, I'm trying to figure out. So, Passion in the Desert bad because Animal Man Bond.
Uh-huh.
Ghost in the Darkness good because man kill animal. Is that basically like what we're gonna be doing here tonight? I didn't know what I was watching. I thought I was gonna be watching like a movie about, a white dude building a bridge in Africa, and like the tribes people were gonna be like, no, capitalism bad, and it didn't turn into any of that. Like that's what the beginning of this movie was kind of like. Like you have the greedy capitalist who wants a bridge built somewhere in the middle of Africa for whatever reason. It's like, okay, I can understand what the story is gonna be coming from, and I kind of thought that at the end Val Kilmer was gonna be the guy, be like, no, this is wrong. I'm not doing this job. Tear the bridge down. Leave these people alone. Blah, blah, blah. Like, that's what this movie was kind of setting up to be within the first 10, 15 minutes. Then all of a sudden, the movie just turns into an hour and a half of them trying to hunt a couple of lions and failing at every single turn, all the way up until the end. And the camera work on some of these like gunfire shots and everything was absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. Oh my god. I'm not going to say that I hated this movie. I will never watch this again. I probably will never think about this again. This is going to be the kind of movie that I'm going to forget as soon as we're done doing this podcast. It was so weird. It was so weird to watch. I didn't know what to make of it. I don't think they knew what they wanted this movie to be. This movie tried to be like 2 or 3 different things. Like it tried to be like the greedy capitalists want bridge. Then it turned into man versus beast. And then it was like man can't do anything about this because beast is a spirit. And it's like, okay, what are we doing? And then you have to like rope in this whole superstitious thing and everything. Okay. All right. I am not the biggest fan of Val Kilmer. It's horrible what's happened to him with his voice and everything, and I feel sorry for him, but that does not excuse his career for me at all. I just don't like him as an actor. I never have. And this movie is one of the reasons why, like, the stakes are through the roof, where there's a whole bunch of people dying and lions are coming into camp and like dragging people off into the middle of nowhere, horror movie style, and Val Kilmer's just like, no, I'm gonna deal with this. And like he goes marching out into the middle of nowhere in the Cat and Nine Tails like 4 or 5 different times in this movie and gets absolutely wrecked and owned. But he plays every single time that he goes off to do this like it's the most epic thing in the world. I don't really understand. Michael Douglas is like a breath of fresh air in this movie because he comes in, he's acting goofy, and I couldn't help but laugh at everything that he did throughout this entire. I couldn't help but just like make fun of him when I was, and just like the way that he acted this part, his mannerisms, just his backstory. Okay, all right. I don't know what else to say. There's really nothing else to say about this movie. After the first half hour, it's basically they're out in the middle of nowhere and they're firing guns, and you hear the same roar played over and over and over again on a track in repetition, and it just keeps going and going and going. Like they're like okay, and yeah, that's those are my opening thoughts. I mean, I'll get more into it later if you really want me to.
Definitely.
But for the most part, but for the most part, this movie was just like a series of gunshots and not a whole lot else of substance. And then they succeed and ba boom and okay.
All right, Lee.
So Michael Douglas comes in, Crocodile Dundee, like American Crocodile Dundee, and like he comes out of nowhere. There's one scene where they're like going out to do something, and it confused me because out of nowhere there was like this intense music. Like he says a word that wasn't even like that big of a deal, and it's like goom ga da 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 da. You're like, wait, what? But it's just they're just walking, and you're like, oh, like it seemed like really out of place. Val Kilmer didn't know where he was from. His accent kind of just changed every few minutes, like within the same sentence, it would change. So I was trying to figure out, I'm like, is he Irish? Maybe. Is he not? I couldn't figure that out, so it was hard to follow. I'm not saying I didn't like the movie, but I am saying I will not watch it again. I have no need to. It was entertaining for one scene. There was one scene that was entertaining, and it was because I was like, wow, if this is not a dream sequence, like that was ridiculous. And because of how everything else was, I was kind of hoping it wasn't a dream sequence, just to like make things more exciting. Not because I'm like, weird and evil or anything, but it was just like, whoa, like that looked ridiculous.
I'll say it. I'll say it for you
it's a
then,
dream.
because I'm the weird and evil one. I will say it. I was really hoping that wasn't a dream sequence. I'll say it for you. There you go.
Yeah, it was just really interesting. I mean, again, I don't hate it. It took me maybe only 2 days, like two sittings to get to watch it. But yeah, wasn't sure what to expect. The trailer made it seem more like they were getting into, as you said, like some spiritual thing, some kind of ghost and the darkness. I mean, it's called The Ghost and the Darkness, and I still don't understand that title. Because it seems I don't see
Their
how
names.
huh?
It's their names.
Oh, there's Ghost and then there's Darkness.
It's the names of the lions.
Okay, one's name is Ghost and the other one's name is
They
the Darkness.
say it in the movie
Okay,
like 4 times.
I know they say it, but
So that's why it's titled The Ghost in the Darkness. How do
Okay.
you not know?
because I couldn't understand what he was saying and why he kept saying the Ghost in the Darkness. I
So
was
when he says in the movie that the locals started calling them the Ghost in the Darkness,
yes.
that was confusing.
I thought they were saying the ghosts in the darkness because you don't see them.
The
They're-
Ghost and the Darkness.
Yeah, that's where I got lost.
Oh, okay.
So it was just like I thought they were just saying those spirits are the ghost in the darkness. I'm like, oh, they're the ghosts in the darkness. Okay, got it. But then I'm like, I kept getting the title wrong because of that. But I mean, I get what it is. I was really hoping to see more like railroad road being built and stuff, but it just seemed like I don't know. I didn't know earlier what I was expecting here, but it's not what I expected, and I'm honestly surprised it got to our list of things to watch. Again, didn't hate it. I just
Why are you surprised it got to our list of things to watch? Dreamcatcher made it to our list.
that's true. But Dreamcatcher you could laugh at a little bit more than this. This I just kept going, I don't understand what's happening here. Why are we watching this?
Well,
Um
can I shed some light on this?
yeah.
So this movie was directed by a gentleman by the name of Stephen Hopkins.
Uh-huh. Not Stephen
His-
Hawking.
His most popular 2 films are Nightmare on Elm Street, Dream Child, and Predator
Oh.
2.
Okay, that checks
Yeah,
out.
This makes a lot more sense now.
The Dream Child. Oh, no, that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
It had a couple of Dream Child feelings to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that one was a weird one with the little kid from Jurassic Park. The dream child. It was the unborn child that was having dreams of Freddy,
Mm.
and that's how she was getting those nightmares because he was dreaming of Freddy, and then Freddy was trying to take him in as his son.
Mm.
Yeah, that was so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dream Warriors was so good, and Dream Master was like what, and then Dream Child. Yeah, and then they obviously swapped out the actress from Dream Warriors to. Anyway, whatever. I can go on forever about the Freddy movies, but yeah, that's Chuck.
Okay, yeah.
So-
why'd you choose this movie?
Why?
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoy this movie.
Okay. All right.
I've
Okay,
seen this
then.
movie probably 20 times in the last 30 years.
20 times?
I
That's a
love this.
lot.
I enjoy this movie.
Okay.
I watch this movie every 5-6 years or so, just as an enjoyment film. So yes, The Ghost in the Darkness. I'm gonna read this offline. The Ghost in the Darkness is based on a true story. The '96 American film is a fictionalized account of the Tsavo man-eaters, 2 male lions that attack workers building a railway bridge in Kenya in 1898. The film stars, as we know, Val Kilmer as Lieutenant Colonel John Henry Patterson, who was sent to Africa in 1898 to oversee the project. Within days of Patterson's arrival, the lions are attacking, and Patterson has to get creative to capture them. The film is based on the true story of 2 man-eaters in Tsavo, a novelization of Dewey Graham that tells the story of 2 hunters who try to track and kill the lions. The lions are described as one ghostly white and one black as night, and they terrorize workers building the bridge in the wildlands of Africa in 1888. The film, crazy enough, won the Academy Award for Best Sound Editing, and some say it's entertaining and charming. However, others say it's not clear how accurate the movie is. Yet the 2 lions' skulls are mounted on taxidermy in the Field Museum in Chicago, where they have been on display since 1928.
Mm-hmm.
So unlike Titanic, where Titanic takes this fictionalized story and puts it into
Mm-hmm.
the real life story, or even Pearl Harbor, where they take this romance and they put it into the
Yeah.
real life scenario of that. The story is actually based on these 2 hunters, Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas, who are hunting these 2 man-eater lions. And the crazy part that they call them the Ghost in the Darkness was exactly that, is lions don't typically respond this way. They usually attack when they're hungry, they eat, and then they don't attack until they're hungry again. But these guys, there were records of, over 30, 40 dead in the course of weeks because of these 2 things, these 2 lions. And I don't know, 96, I was 50, I was 82 to 96 is what, 14, 15 years old. I was probably 15 years old when I first saw this movie. And it's supposed to be a thriller. A drama thriller. And back in the 90s, Val Kilmer, he was known for Batman. He was known for a couple small things. And Michael Douglas, he's been Michael Douglas. He's known for so much out there. But for me, this movie, I don't always have to watch movies that require intelligent thought to get through it. I don't have to watch movies that require, it doesn't have to be Tenet to watch the movie. I enjoy a movie where the plot and the story, sometimes they're very simple, but it's enjoyable to watch. And for 95 or 96, I did some more looking up. There was only 1 or 2 scenes where they used an animatronic lion. The rest of the lion shots were all trained and tamed lions that they used for the rest of the movie. Aside from the one scene where he's in the cage, I think that was done with animatronic. You could obviously tell it was fake, but outside of that, all the live scenes that you see them walking around, all trained and tamed lions that they have, that they're being coached. And I thought that was really, really cool that they actually got actual lions to do a film like this. And it's not like to your point, Will, it's not a in-depth plot. It is guy goes to build a bridge, scenario happens, rest of the movie is trying to solve the scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy that every time they try to think of something, it goes wrong until he has to finally face it face to face, literally face to face. And I thought it was enjoyable. Personally.
I think I would have enjoyed this movie a lot more if it wasn't for like the first 10-15 minutes where you're introduced to the guy who's, funding the project, and there's all these threats about you'll never work again and I'll damage your reputation and you better get this done in 5 months and that whole thing, because you're setting up kind of a different movie in the first act. Like the first 15-20 minutes is setting up a completely different film. And then all of a sudden it changes at the beginning of the second act when you introduce the lions.
I think it's supposed to happen because
if it had just opened, if it had just opened with guy building a bridge, everything is going swimmingly, and then all of a sudden you introduce the lions, I think I would have enjoyed this movie a lot more. Because you're right, I don't always need, intricate or complicated plot to enjoy a movie. I don't always need that. I'm just saying, like, the first 15-20 minutes is really like, it almost feels like false advertisement. You're advertising this movie to be something different, and then all of a sudden it's like it's not that at all. And like the threat of the business owner just kind of goes away.
I think he comes back in the middle of it and still threatens them.
Sure.
But I think that's the point, is if you were in real life, your thought process is, this is what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get there, and then 2 days later, or that same day that you get there, the next day, this happens. And you're like, this is not at all what I signed up for. So I think even the main character is probably thinking and feeling exactly what we feel, going, this is not what we were trying to watch. This is something different than what we expect. And we're getting something than something different than what we expect. And I think that was purposeful. I can see why you don't like that. I mean, for me, it's kind of like when we watched, we did Red Eye. I was like, I don't like the last 15 minutes because it goes way off base from what it was supposed to be. This is kind of the reverse of that. So I can kind of see, like in Red Eye, it was airport, airplane, and then it was like the last act was like in the suburbs.
Yeah.
So this was like in the States, and then the last 2.5 acts were, in Africa, and all the craziness happens. But for me, this movie isn't one of my, it's not like a top 10 type movie, but it's in my top 50. I like this movie a lot. I enjoy it. There's not a lot to like. I mean, you could look at the acting, the special effects, not a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
The graphics. I mean, next year is 30 years. So I mean, or 2 years, it's 30 years.
2 years.
So it's a fairly older movie. But for me, I really enjoy this film.
So
that's just
you must watch more movies than any of us combined here, because if you've watched this movie 20 times in the past 30 years,
probably
that kind of blows my mind, especially if you're saying it's in your top 50. So that means it's not your number one, yet you either watch it more than all the others if you've watched it 20 times in 30 years. So that's crazy. You must really have a lot more time than I do to watch movies.
So I don't have a lot more time. It's just,
I mean, I've seen.
I don't know. Maybe I just like movies.
I get where
I don't like specific
Chuck
movies. I like movies.
I get where Chuck is coming from on this. I've seen Rocky 100 times easy. Not my favorite movie. Nowhere near it, but I've seen that.
You really think you've watched it 100 times?
All the way through 100? All the way through 100? No. All the way through, maybe somewhere closer to what Chuck is talking about, maybe 30, 40. But like 100 times, like in passing, it's on, TBS, TNT, I'm going to watch the rest of it. Here's this segment, that I really like, that I stumbled across on TV. I enjoyed that. Like that together, like I've definitely seen Rocky more times than I've seen any other movie in my life. It's not my favorite movie though. It's not in my top 20. I understand.
But here's the thing though, is movies for me, when I say I like movies, I don't like movies in the sense of I want to watch this movie and I want to rip it apart. Because even Will was like last week we were talking.
Yeah.
He's like, "You're turning into us," and there is a sense where I am turning into that. And I do criticize movies more, and I'm becoming more the critic than I am the basic viewer. And I've always been a critic. However, for me, movies is my favorite pastime. If I had the choice as a pastime to do anything, I will put a good movie on. I will watch something that entertains me. I will watch something that, for you guys, it's, for people like Will, it's music where, it will either lift up your spirit or your soul, or you'll feel something. And, people will be like, oh, you have the old people like they're love sick. They put on a love song, or they put on a romance ballad, or, for me, sometimes depending the scene, the mood I'm in, I'll put a movie that reflects the mood I'm in.
Yeah.
Back in the day when I was in my early teens, late teens, early 20s, when Fast and the Furious came out, I used to drive a little sports car. I used to watch Fast and the Furious, get myself all the first Fast and the Furious, not the rest of them. The only good one. I used to put Fast and the Furious on and then get in my car and go cruising and speed around. Because what the heck was that?
That's you cruising.
Oh, not crashing, cruising.
Playing with the sound effects.
But for me, movies is actually one of my all-time favorite pastimes to do. It is like, since I was 13 years old, the way people listen to music, the way people read books, the way people will go mountain climbing, the way people will do, that is movies for me. And it always, I will, except for horror now, and like, softcore, any kind of new, like, porn or grossness, stuff like that. Give me a romance movie, give me a comedy, give me a thriller, give me an action, give me a martial arts, give me an epic, give me any of that stuff, and I'll watch it because I enjoy movies.
And I respect that about you. I like that about you a lot. And I think you're a good, I think in a lot of ways you saying that you're a good contrast to people like Lee and I, who can be a little bit more critical at times. Because I think the three of us should be able to meet in the middle on things like that. I think you should
100%.
be a little bit. I think you should be a little bit more critical, and I think Lee and I could be a little bit more forgiving on a lot of things that we see. So it's kind of like, a merging of that, and I like that dynamic about the three of us.
But and I'm becoming more critical, which is why there are certain movies, like my all-time favorite movie is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. I will never suggest that.
That's fine.
Because I don't want to walk away hating the movie.
That's fine.
Because I know it will. Because I watch it and I go, I watch it now and I go, there are so many holes in this movie. There's so many things like that just don't make sense and they don't fit. But I'm like, you know what? There's a sentimental place in my life with that film, and I don't want to ever lose that. So I will never go into that with the critical mind, the movie critic mind. When I watch that, I will turn that off and watch it for sheer enjoyment.
Right. I think everybody kind of has that. You definitely more than us.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'll watch something that I loved as a kid. So I mean, for example, I know this is goofy and out there, but like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, I used to rent that from West Coast Video like over and over again when I was a kid. That, Back to the Future, some Winnie the Pooh thing. I mean, when I say kid, I mean like 4, 5, 6, and I'd watch it over and over again. And then when I was like 15, I watched it on TV and I was like, this is not what I remember it being. Like, there's entertaining parts, but it was like I had a whole other thought of what it was in my head, and then it kind of ruined it for me. Where I enjoy it. I'll watch it now and again, but I'm not all hyped up like I used to be as a kid.
What, Bill and Ted or Back to the Future?
Well, Bill and Ted, but like Back to the Future, for example.
You want to do a Bill and Ted like movie night?
I did one. I've done it.
But you want to do it again?
No, I don't. I never said that.
Oh,
okay. No. So my point is, when you watch something when you're younger and you really enjoy something, it's hard for you to watch that unbiased later on and be able to give it like a full critique, because you're kind of stuck with there's that sentimental value of something that, kind of brings you back to when you were a kid, when things were simpler, and we appreciate that.
Sure.
But I mean, for me, for example, when Equilibrium came out, I'm like, this is the greatest movie. This movie is awesome. I love the concept. I love the way it was shot. I love like the kind of the darkness that they had going on with it. But then later on, when Will and I revisited it, like we just sat there and we're like, yeah, like I still like the story of it, but it just didn't age well. And for some reason, that one was one where I was able to kind of like let go and be like, yeah, like I'll watch it again, but I'm not. It's not on my top anymore.
I don't care if movies don't. I mean, there are certain movies that I care about, but there are films where I'm like, when it came out, it was still like not Equilibrium, but there was still like it was still up there with special effects. But then you watch it 20 years later, and you're like, wait a minute. But like even there, I mean, we talked about
maybe
Dr.
that was the
Strangelove.
shock. Maybe that was the shock of Equilibrium, that it did not age well, and neither one of us had seen it in 20 years before we did it, and it's like, okay, yeah, let's
Maybe
watch
a
this,
decade.
and then okay, fine, but then it's like, oh wow, like it's
So I was actually-
jarring to go back and revisit something like that when you know what I mean, like, so I don't know.
I can
Maybe it's just that
compare it
thing.
more to video games. Like,
Sure.
playing a game and then playing it years later, and you're like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
these graphics are actually keeping me from enjoying the game at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah.
It's like I don't
Horrible
remember them being this bad.
Horrible polygons on the PS1, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, they look
even the
horrible now.
Even the PS2, some of the games on there that I really enjoyed. Like I thought
Yeah.
Iron Man was a really cool game. So I loved Iron Man when it came out. I mean, geez, that was back in 2008, and they still had PlayStation 2 games coming out. And I remember playing that and being like, this game is awesome. I went to go play it like a couple years ago, and I'm like, this is unbearable. Like, it's choppy. It's like, it's really sluggish. The controls aren't really great. And I was like, I can't do it anymore. It just doesn't really add up. But
Right.
this is what happens when you get into film. When you watch things, it's like you can appreciate things for multiple different reasons. You can appreciate it for the story, for the acting, for the writing, for the graphics, whatever. But as we grow up and as we start critiquing things in a different way, it's like, okay, what are we really trying to get out of this? Are we just watching this for enjoyment, or are we watching this to pick it apart? And I think nowadays it's just
to pick it apart.
Yeah, it's to pick it apart. And
where's the fun in that then?
Where's
the fun in movies if all you do it's like in I know Will hasn't seen this, but I think I think you have, in The Greatest Showman. And Hugh Jackman's talking to the theater critic, and he is like, what is the point of you enjoying theater if you can't even laugh and enjoy theater for what it is?
Yeah.
Sure.
What's the point of watching a film if you can't enjoy it?
Yeah.
If you're always walking out of the theater or walking with a movie going, I have to watch it 4 more times to figure out if I like it, and yada yada yada.
Well,
I think
that's valid because there's an initial shock. You watch something for the first time and you go, "Oh, that's what this is." And then you can watch it a second time for one of two things. One, to rip it apart because you really didn't like it, or two, to find what you did like about it so you can find some level of entertainment from it. So
I think 90s is a different beast, though, because when you're talking about a lot of 90s movies and you're looking at a lot of those special effects, they were brand new, and every studio was really eager to get their toe into that. And a lot of those movies that have special effects aged like milk because it was so new. Like, you got to be able to put yourself in a certain mindset when you're watching something from the 90s.
And
Not so much this movie, but for everything else that we're talking about, or even the early 2000s, like Equilibrium. Like, it was the technology that they were using to create a lot of those special effects in that world was so brand new that to us, when we watched it back then, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And now it's like 20 years later, 30 years later, and it's like, maybe not.
I think it was amazing back then, as much as we just looked past it because it wasn't focused on.
Well, you look past it because you had never seen anything like that before. I think that has a lot to do with it. I don't know. Maybe I'll try an experiment, and I'll like psych myself up or put myself in a mindset where it's like, I'm going to watch a 90s movie. I have to look at it through this lens. I cannot compare it to anything that we have today or in the past 10, 15 years. It has to be like in its own little box and bubble.
The problem with that, like we've talked about before, is, I mean, Terminator 2 had a lot of CG, obviously, because of, Robert Patrick there. But still Jurassic Park still holds up, and that was 1993.
Yeah, but there were select films here and there
That
that
used
held up,
ILM and did a
that held up really, really well, but that wasn't the norm.
No.
And you're also talking about movies that had enormous budgets.
Yeah.
And that's
Right, and
another
it's like
thing.
it's like we were
like
talking
your
about
regular
earlier.
schmegula movie coming out of the 90s did not have the $100 million plus budget that Jurassic Park had. Like, let's
Right.
just
We
be
were talking
real
about this with
that.
earlier with Lee. Lee was talking about how, tell me a whole, how you used, Atari and stuff like that. When you go back to Atari and you're playing that,
It's
graphics
unplayable.
are awful.
It's
Yet
unplayable.
but you go, because it's Atari.
Yeah.
But when we go back to 80s and 90s films, you have to go, it was 80s and 90s.
Absolutely.
But
But
the
movies
impression that I get is you can't do that with movies.
movies in
Who's
the
saying
80s
that?
and 90s. No, movies
I
in
said
the
the
80s.
impression that I'm getting from you is that you can't just go,
Me or Will?
you.
Oh no, I'm saying you can, but the hard part is when you go back and you see other movies that happened before it that looked better, and you're like, okay, I understand it's a budget thing and whatnot, but when you do something and you're making a movie and you look and you say, 3 years ago Jurassic Park did this, maybe we should just cut back on the special effects because this looks like poop. Let's not make this look like poop. I mean, a movie like this, yes, they used real lions, but there were scenes where they had like 2 lions in the shot, and it was like green screened.
Nope, there were two different lions
No, there were 2 different lions, but they were
together.
they weren't together. Rewatch that scene. There was like a blue screen that they used, and it
wasn't-
was clearly imposed that they had the 2 like together. They weren't actually together for real. But yeah, it was glaring.
It's not just that. It's not just that. And mild spoiler warning before we actually get into it. There's a couple of shots where it's like the lion's dragging the person off into the middle of nowhere, and it's like the camera really close up shots of the lion's face to hide how bad it would probably looked if they did it wider. Like
Right.
things like that where you're only going to see something like that from something in the 80s or in the 90s. Because they just couldn't
because they
do
didn't
it.
have a way to do it. Exactly.
didn't have a way to
Those
do it.
shots were great.
Yeah.
Those shots were great, but when they try to do stuff like I said, the double lion thing, it's like, okay, maybe I understand that they were trying to prove the point that there were 2 of them, so they had to be in the same.
There was
shot.
only like there was only I think 2 shots where there were 2 of them together.
Absolutely, and that's
So-
why they only did it those many times because it didn't look great. But I'm not gonna poop on the movie because it did that. I'm just surprised when, when we see certain things come out, you're like, okay, why would they say, yeah, this looks great and can stand up to everything else that's been out in the past decade?
Well, they don't.
Let's go ahead and put this out.
But that means to have that mindset, you can only watch 1% of the films that come out and enjoy them.
True. I okay.
So at that point, I guess I would ask you at that point, are you truly a movie person if that's how you watch film?
You're saying about me. Okay, no, I can watch it.
That doesn't
I question sometimes when certain things are actually greenlit to be released.
right, but I
because
mean
when movies come out, there's so much stuff that ends up on the cutting room floor, and I wonder how come some things didn't get out there, because you see some of the deleted scenes from some of the older movies and you go, okay, I can see how they weren't able to do that, so they just cut it out. Like it wouldn't have fit here. You can tell so many great stories by cutting away and implying things. So it's like, if you want to tell a good story, I mean, geez, this goes back to the simplest thing. My wife and I were actually just talking about it. We don't watch horror movies or anything anymore, but she goes, the Blair Witch Project was a really good movie.
Yeah.
And they had no budget because they
Zero.
told the story with just like a handy cam, and that was it. Because they came up with an interesting story and said, how can we make this scare the poop out of people? And they did with just a story and a handy cam and some people. That was it.
So
and
I
some
will-
noises in the woods.
I will
That's
say
it.
this. I'll speak for myself. Look. Whether I enjoy a movie, I love a movie, I hate a movie, or I'm indifferent, or if I'm just mid about it, I'm still really glad that I watched it because I do love movies. I love the art of film.
Oh,
It doesn't
yeah.
matter
right.
to me whether I enjoyed it or not. I get enjoyment out of a movie regardless. I'm glad I watched it, but that's where I am. I am a movie fan.
Right.
I will watch anything that you put in front of me at least once. I'll give it a shot. Whether I
Right.
like it or not is irrelevant. I love the art of
right,
a
and
movie.
I've always been the same way as well too. And there's definitely films that I hate. And to your point, Lee, as this doesn't add up to like a Jurassic Park, how many thousands of films don't add up to this movie?
Yeah.
And there's so
I'm not just to clarify here. I'm not saying this movie's bad and all those scenes should have been cut. I'm talking in general because there are a lot of movies that have come out, like horror movies, for example. They've got they have a movie called Sharks of the Corn. Okay, there's literally a shark killing people in a cornfield, and it was released, and you can find it streaming. Sharknado exists, and that actually had a budget.
7 or 8 of them.
Yes,
exist.
But somehow they were greenlit, and I don't understand how like that was okay and not like some Funny or Die thing, and that's it. Like I can't believe it was actually a film, and it exists.
Well, that's because people have, mind you, strange and weird, but they have imaginations, and they're allowed to go and do the. And if someone wants to, this is how I look at it. We're critics.
If somebody wants to make Sharknado, they should be allowed to make Sharknado.
And go for it. It doesn't mean that everyone's gonna watch
Not at all.
But I feel like, when it comes to for us to say how was it greenlit, how was it that's like us, that's like armchair quarterbacks that are sitting on Sundays going, how can that person miss that catch?
I know.
Well, you play in that and see how good you will do.
I know.
I had this any of us in any of their positions, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. We would be making films. And a lot of people start out with films like that, and then they get better and better because they're learning along the way. Mm-hmm. For example, we talked about this the last time we had a conversation. We're talking about AI, and I said wait until back we were talking about War of the Worlds and how on the radio it was a crazy thing, and we're talking about Equilibrium. Equilibrium 20 years ago put in film exactly what we talked about with AI. The father was AI.
Mm-hmm.
He was a fake person on a screen commanding everybody to do something through somebody else that was actually controlling it all, and everybody's following this imaginary person.
Doctor Who. Or, well, Alfred.
We're all that is the potential of our future right now.
Yeah.
So even though I will like Equilibrium, I loved it because the concept, and I like martial arts, and the fight scenes were fun.
Yeah, the gun kata.
The gun katas were fun. The actual martial arts were fun. The special effects were garbage, especially the smoke and the, when he's peeling away the stuff off the window.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was horrible.
While we're getting there, I just recently, just in passing, watched The Flash again.
Okay.
I still don't understand. Like, the only thing I can say that I can use to forgive is they're just saying, well, because he's moving so fast, they just made everything there CG. But the babies? The dog?
That's horrible.
How come all of the CG in that movie was so bad?
How come the microwave dings at the end?
Because it was done.
No, it wasn't plugged in.
It wasn't plugged in.
Because it's an old microwave.
No, it wasn't.
Sure.
They still needed a plug.
The internal parts, it just dings.
No.
Like a toaster.
No.
Ding. Old microwaves used to do that. My dad had this old one. You know the old clocks from the 80s that weren't digital? They just had the flaps that came down for the numbers? Yeah, like that's what the microwave my dad had was. But the last time he tried to use it, the thing like fried because
yeah,
it was,
of course it
like
did.
40 years old. It was the size of my desk. But no, I mean, just to clarify, I am just saying that a lot of stuff comes out, and especially in the 90s. I mean, well, stuff that came out in the 90s, there were lots of movies that were released all the time. We didn't have these pandemics that were keeping people in their homes and all these writer strikes that were stopping all these things. Like, movies just kept pumping out. Every week there was another movie, or like 7 other movies. Like, they just kept on putting things out. No.
In the 90s, and this is what I miss. This is what they do. They pump out.
I'm not talking about blockbusters. I'm just talking about movies in general.
But they still didn't do that. So movies came out less in theaters in the 90s than they get pumped out now.
Well, there's a lot more now because some go straight to Netflix or straight
Talk
to
about
stream.
even in theaters. There's
Yeah.
more popping out in theaters now and more big budget films.
Big
I mean,
budget. Yes.
there was a summer blockbuster.
Mhm.
There was a Christmas blockbuster with a
True.
handful of other smaller movies that
Mhm.
came out. And movies were in the theaters for 2, 3, 4 months.
That's true.
Not
Okay.
a month and a
I'll
half.
backpedal.
So they're pumping out movies way more now than they were then. Like in 91 when Robin Hood came out, it was the summer, and the summer blockbusters were the 2.5 hour films.
Yeah.
And now every movie is 2.5 to 3 hours. And it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
This is true.
It's a lot. And the longer movies are 3.5 hours, And
Valid.
So
how long was the Snyder Cut?
4.5 hours. Which, by the way, I saw that Rebel Moon came out. Did you realize that the idea for a Snyder Cut once the second film comes out is actually what they're planning? So once the second movie comes out, they're going to release an entire film that is both as the Snyder Cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just release the Snyder Cut. Just release the Snyder Cut.
So
yeah.
Do we want to transition?
Yeah. I think we should. I mean, the rest of the world is.
Yeah.
So I guess it's me, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to experience the rest of this riveting conversation on video, find us on patreon.com/blackandwhitereviews. That's patreon.com/blackandwhitereviews. Support the podcast and help us grow. You can also find us on social media at Black and White Reviews 1866 on the YouTubes and Instagram, and also at Black and White Reviews on Facebook. As always, the audio portion will be available on all podcasting services aside from Google as of April 2nd.
Yep.
By Google Podcast.
By Google Podcast. I wonder if they're going to take YouTube as their new podcasting thing.
Wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they own YouTube, so it's the same.
So with that being said, we will catch you in spoiler territory.
Okay, so I want to start with something because I'm doing a little bit of research about this movie, and the behind the scenes is vastly more interesting than the movie.